are doing other things, we bless them. We bless them anyway. All right, so I'd like to talk this morning, church family, um, about inaction. This topic has been on my heart for a while, and yeah, I'd like to talk about inaction. So I'd like to go to the book of James. You know, it's one thing Archbishop used to say, don't be afraid of the book, son. Don't be afraid of the book. So we'll go to John today. James 1, verses 6 through 8. But let him ask in faith, nothing wavering. For he that wavereth is like a wave of the sea, driven with the wind and tossed. For let not that man or woman think that he or she shall receive anything of the Lord. A double-minded man or woman is unstable in all his or her ways. So inaction. I always like to not only go to the book, you know, the Bible, but to go to Dr. Google. Dr. Google is my best girlfriend. And when I looked up the word inaction, Dr. Google said, lack of affection where some is expected or appropriate, inactivity, laziness, inaction. So let's get to work, family. The verse, James 1, is warning about procrastination. Just because we don't have the complete picture is no excuse for inactivity. And it's interesting, while I heard someone said this very same thing earlier. Because we don't have the full picture is no excuse to do nothing. Solomon advises us to get moving because the good things God has to offer will not come to those who waver. Do not procrastinate. Plunging. Solomon was a mover and a shaker. He got things done. We all like movers and shakers. We all have movers and shakers in our lives. And some of us are movers and shakers in our own right. But Solomon learned right principles of how to make a success of his life. Though he is giving them to us in quaint illustration, things we cannot easily relate to, right? He is nonetheless giving us steps to success with God. The key to this is the faith that God is with us and that he will work things out. But she also requires things of us. We are required to do some stuff. There's some things that we need to do. If we are looking for another job, the very minimum, we have to put in an application. There are some things that we are required to do. Deceive commitment, enthusiasm, putting off, passivity, not procrastinating, and doing the right thing with God. So many years ago, I lived in Boston and moved to California. I wanted something different. I wanted something different in my life. And so I moved to California. Went to California and stumbled on the Mother Church because I wanted no part of church. As far as I'm concerned, I lived in Jamaica, and the rest is history. And so I wanted nothing to do with the church. And then I went one evening and I got it just sparked. There was something there that I could not seem to get enough of. And there was one, I think he was minister then, Minister Russ, taught a class. And he taught us about the life of Bishop Carbine. How Bishop Bean took the bus and he went to the hospital to visit the sick, to visit those who were sick with AIDS, and nobody would visit them because nobody understands this craziness, this disease. Nobody understood it. And so nobody wanted to go and see these folks. And so these folks would die a miserable death in the hospital with no friends or relatives or family to visit them. But this man would take the bus because at the time he didn't drive. And so he would take the bus and he went to the hospital to visit them. Blew my mind, completely blew my mind. I was in healthcare when I worked in Boston, and the AIDS epidemic was still new and nobody understood it. So it was crazy. You just watch my friends dropping every week, a friend would die. And we never understood it. We didn't know what was going on. But this man would go to the hospital, even to people who he did not know, because someone would call him and he would take the bus to go and visit. When folks died due to complications of the AIDS virus, they called him to bury them. Because even then, folks still unclear about this illness. I don't know if they thought something was going to jump out at them. I don't know what the thought was, but folks didn't want to touch it, wanted nothing to do with it. So again, the word inaction means lack of affection, where some is expected or appropriate. Now, it is difficult to take action sometimes. It is very difficult, and I'm going to go through that. Just bear with me. It's difficult to take action sometimes. It was difficult for other folks to have visited those sick folks, sick relatives in the hospital because they had this virus, and it was difficult. It was this fear of this unknown. Nobody understood it, and the information wasn't coming. It was a gay disease, and so it was just a bad time in our history. But Archbishop did something. Even though he didn't quite know what was going to happen, but he did something, because in his heart, this was not right. Something was wrong here. Something was wrong. Let's look at the mass shootings that has captured our attention in the media for the past few weeks. As we hear some talk about the importance of these guns of war and why we must have them, it's our constitutional rights to have these guns that will crank out 100 bullets because it's our constitutional rights. Can't come up with a reason why it's necessary for civilians to have these things if we're not going to fight war, but it's our constitutional rights, and they come up with all these craziness. Okay. And there are some who will say this is crazy. We should not have these. But these folks who we elected, we voted for them. And we sit back because, oh, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? Yes, we can do something. There's always something we can do. We can vote them out. Inaction. 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 As I was in LA and I drove along the streets in LA, and good heavens, the amount of tents on the street, the homelessness, the addiction, the mental illness for all these God's creatures, God's babies, God's people, God's children, all these folks, and no one does anything. It seems like no one is doing anything about it. Why? Why? The United States is the greatest nation on earth. And we say, oh, well, what you're going to do, Representative Karen Bass, someone who I've met many times. I have an awful lot of respect for her. And I know she's running to be the mayor of Los Angeles. And I pray she becomes the mayor of Los Angeles. This is one of her platforms to do something about this. And when she gets in there, we better hold her accountable. Try something, do something, but you can't just do nothing. You got to do something. In action. In action. I was not born in the United States. Surprise, surprise. And I can tell you, and most of the folks on the call here will tell you that America, oh my gosh, the greatest thing on earth. If anything can be done, America is going to do it. Just look at the border, the Mexican border, 100,000 people there to risk their lives, left their home, left everything they know, everything that is dear to them. They left because they're coming here because America can fix their lives. America can do all these things and can't take care of your homeless people. That's crazy. Mentally ill people, they need help. Substance abuse, these things can be treated. Inaction, enough. Enough is enough. How many times there are things in our lives, in our personal lives, in our families, where things are just not right, and we just sit and do nothing. Solomon talks about that. If your cause is of God, if your cause is of God, then tell me, why on God's earth do you think God will not see you through it? If what you believe in, if this homelessness is an issue, if these weapons of war are an issue, we don't think an 18-year-old should be able to just walk in and purchase these guns. Here in the wonderful state of Florida, I heard something last night. I was watching an ad where you can go in and it's a 5-question questionnaire. You just answer the questionnaire and then you can go buy your gun. That is crazy. That's just craziness. But I challenge us all, what we cannot afford to do is nothing. We can't do nothing. We can't just say, okay, John will do it, or, Dr. So-and-so will do it, or Mr. So-and-so will do it, Senator so-and-so will do it. We need to hold them accountable. They need to be held accountable. Something can and must be done. Something must be done. This is the greatest nation on earth. None come close. Now, I'm not telling you nothing that I haven't done. There is a young man, or was a young man, in Jamaica. He was 20 or 21. And his name was Brandon Lewis. Young Brandon had a job, worked at the hotel, one of the hotels, and he liked to dance and sing and act a fool, just like every kid does. like I did when I was his age. We all did. And Brandon was going home from work one evening, and um, the folks in his community started calling him names. I don't know if he answered them. Dead men tell no tales. And they brutally beat him, cracked his skull. And Brandon was taken to the Bustamante Hospital in Montego Bay. He had surgery. This is in the middle of COVID. Immediately, he was taken to the operating room, and they had surgery. They had to, apparently the brain was swollen, and so they had to release the tension, whatever the heck they do. They did that to young Brandon. All because, excuse me, he's a gay man. He might have walked with a little flair, a little swish to his steps, and they beat him. While in the hospital, Brandon caught COVID. Now, at the time, remember at the time, we can't forget this stuff either. At the time, there were people in the emergency room who were waiting for over a week trying to get a bed because the beds were all full. So you sat in the emergency room. I had a cousin who was there for 6 days. He sat in the emergency room, and he had an IV. He had some medical stuff going on. And so Brandon, it was time to discharge Brandon, but Brandon had COVID. And he didn't have an appropriate home to go to. And so the hospital had a contract with a hotel. And so young Brandon was taken to the hotel. And the hospital checked on him and waited until he tested negative for COVID. And then they sent him home. Young Brandon and his advocate called me and asked if we could take him in the safe house. I was scared out of my wits. All I kept saying was, we would know how to treat him. We would know what to do with him. And I said no. Inaction. I said no. Young Brandon went home. He was taken home. And apparently the house where he lived, the ceiling, part of the ceiling had caved in. And so when it rained, the contents of the house was wet. So pretty poor condition. And I had worked with the house manager, Unity Safe House manager, to send him care packages. So he would get boxes of, food stuff and clothing, toiletries, etc., and sent to him, to young Brandon. Young Brandon the following week was scheduled to go back to the hospital. He didn't, because he was scared. He didn't want to go back through the community. You see, in Jamaica, you don't have buses, and you can't call Uber. So you have to walk in town to go to where the taxi stand, or like a bus stop when it's taxis, cars with 4, 5, 6 people in the taxi. So he didn't go because he was scared that they would beat him up again. 2 weeks, 3 weeks, Brandon now had pneumonia because the conditions of the house where he lived, he had pneumonia. And now they had to take him to the hospital. Brandon went to the hospital. 3 days later, Brandon died. Brandon died 3 days later. Now, you know, a good friend of mine say all the time, you know, we can't save everybody. And I know we can't. I know, I'm clear on that. But inaction, you do nothing. I don't know what, if that should happen today, I don't know what I'll do. I don't know. Because we don't have the space. And, you know, I'm not going to kick somebody out of the house to bring somebody else in, because that's not humane. So I don't know what I'll do. But all I know is I did nothing, because I remember the kid's voice. That thing rings in my head. I get nightmare by that voice. Get a very, very faint, very unique voice, and I still hear, Reverend Evan, it's me, Brandon. Now, let's go a little deeper, if I may. There is a certain pain for inaction and one for action. What do you mean, Pastor? Thank you for asking. When you get pain from action, it forces you to be better. I have a friend in Jamaica, a very, very good friend. And when I told him about the safe house, he said, don't waste your money. Go take your trips. He used to take trips. Go take your trips. Buy your clothes. Don't waste your money. He even said, you know, if there was a house for rent on my street, or even if the house was free, I would never tell you about it, because I don't want those people around me. Gay man, openly gay man. But he didn't want those people living on the street where he's living. So the pain from his words forced me even harder to be sure that we got a safe house, because I did not have the house then. It was just a thought. And then you have these thoughts, you know, you go to your friends and, you know, you hope you will find a friend who will, you know, be of like minds and will help you, and sort of encourage you and kind of figure it out together. And with him, that forced me to prove him wrong. So the pain that I got from him forced me to do something. So the pain from action forces you to be better. The pain from inaction for doing nothing for Brandon, eats at you like a cancer, tears your guts out, because I did nothing. One friend taught the nonsense he did that forced us to have a safe house. Inaction, it just eats away at you like a cancer. This pain, this church family gives pain a purpose. The pain of inaction, can't do anything about that now. The young man is gone. But the pain from my friend forces us to do something. So one pain would make you better, make things better. The other pain just eats away at you like a cancer. Just imagine if Karen Bass should become the next mayor of Los Angeles, and we hold her accountable, and she put a dent in the homelessness in LA. Just imagine. That pain would give purpose, would bring purpose, as opposed to doing nothing. And you look at it every time, and you just look at, if you, because I'm in the mental health business, and I see those folks, and I see them, and Lord have mercy, you just want to do something. You just want to do something. You feel so hopeless, feel so helpless, because you're unable to do anything. That is the pain of inaction. Action, inaction. So I challenge you, family. I challenge you. What will you do? What will you do? Inaction or action? The picture of young Brandon is hung in my office, my home office, because that forces me, as I think about these things, it forces me about action and inaction. So I'm not just talking about something that someone told me. I'm talking about something that I'm living and breathing right now. We need another safe house. We need more safe houses. We need more safe houses. I had a conversation with a partner in Canada. And as I told them about what we're doing, they asked if we would be willing to go to another country to show them how to do this. Because they appreciate what it is that we're doing. And ask if we'd be willing to go somewhere else too. I don't know if they're joking, but they haven't said anything. There's something else, because I'm trying to get a full-time psychologist, just trying to figure out how we're going to pay for it. But I'm not worried about it. If this is of God, God will see us through. If this is of God, why on God's earth do we think God will not see this through? Why? Why? Action, inaction. What will it be, family? What will you choose? What will you choose? Thank you very much. God bless you all.